The reason why I chose this topic and the reason why I chose this title, Islamic doctrines. Islamic doctrines means those beliefs that are crucial and fundamental to our faith. We call ourselves Muslims or believers, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us in the Quran as Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe. Now it's very important for us to understand what that actually means, what our Aqidah, what our creed is, and what our beliefs are. If we are not able to understand that, then our beliefs will be incomplete. If our beliefs are incomplete, every single moment that we spend in the worship of Allah, or every moment we spend doing good deeds, all of it will be incomplete. Why? Because every single thing is based upon your beliefs and your creed. What you believe, why you believe it. These are the two most important questions. Before I start the lecture today, I'll just go over what Aqidah actually is, why it's important, where do we derive it from, and what are we going to be talking about in the coming weeks. I know usually what happens is the first lecture is always busy, after that people get bored. I can't really do anything about that other than tell you what's about to come. We'll talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala today. Then we'll talk about prophets, we'll talk about angels, we'll talk about jinns, we'll talk about the day of judgment, we'll talk about the resurrection, we'll talk about the grave, we'll talk about the sirat, we'll talk about the hawd, the pool on the day of judgment, we'll talk about the hisab, the reckoning, we'll talk about Jannah and Jahannam. And this is literally from the start of a person's life right till the end. Everything that we must believe, all of that will be covered, alongside other things which generally people are more enjoy listening to, such as the signs of the day of judgment, when it's going to happen. Obviously I can't tell you that, but I can tell you some signs that Allah and His Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam have mentioned within the Quran and the Sunnah for us to become aware. Now, the reason why I'm starting off with this topic and being very basic is because initially I wanted to do some lectures on advanced theology, like atheism, and dealing and answering such objections regarding anything regarding our creed. Why we believe what we believe. Why is it impossible for there to be two gods? Why is there only one God? Why is it impossible for a God to lie? Why can God not lie? Why is it such that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all merciful, but He will still punish those who disbelieve eternally? These are some of the objections that are thrown at Muslims and believers by atheists. And some of us fail to comprehend them, number one. And number two, sometimes we fail to reply to them. That was my initial goal and purpose, to hold lectures on these topics. But I would believe that I'd be doing an injustice if I did not give you the basics first and went straight into the deep end. Okay, when you go to swimming, you start in the shallow end first, then you go into the deep end. Otherwise you'll end up drowning. The same thing applies to creed. If you go into the detailed matters of creed but have not understood the basis and the basic matters, then you will struggle to comprehend the detailed matters. So I don't know what you've come here expecting. I hope you didn't expect a very, very academic lecture. I'm going to be basic at the start. Inshallah, once we cover this entire topic in a basic manner, then we can move on to more detailed discussions and more advanced discussions. So we start off with, why is Aqidah important? Now, as I mentioned earlier, Aqidah is the crux of everything. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to us in the Quran, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe. Thereafter He gives the command that He wants to give, or He prohibits whatever He wishes to prohibit. But before saying anything, Allah makes it clear that He is talking to who? The believers. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe. What is this belief? What makes us believers? Every single time Allah is speaking to us in the Quran, He is speaking to us by the merit of us being believers. That's why Aqidah is important. Because throughout the Quran, Allah commands us to do so many things. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. O you who believe, save yourself and save your children from the fire of hell. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullah. O you who believe, fear God. So the fear God and fearing Allah is coming after. What's coming first is that you are a believer. That's why you are being commanded to do this. But what makes us a believer? And why is it important? It's important because every command or every good deed, Allah commands us to do good deeds throughout the Quran. The Messenger ﷺ has commanded us to do good and stay away from evil throughout the ahadith. But all of these commands and prohibitions are for who? For the believers. So every single thing that you do in life is dependent upon you being a believer. That's why Aqidah is important, because Aqidah will tell you what you must believe. That's the reason why Aqidah is important. The acceptance of every single action in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is dependent upon your creed, upon your belief. For example, if somebody who did not believe in God came and prayed with us or worshipped Allah, even though they did not believe in Him, of course, that will not be accepted. Okay? It's illogical. How can you not believe in a God and then you expect your ibadah, your worship to be accepted? It doesn't make sense logically. So whatever worship you do, whatever good deed you do that because you believe in God. And every single action is dependent upon that belief. That's why Aqidah is important. The second question is, what is Aqidah then? We've understood why Aqidah is important, because every single thing that we do is dependent upon our belief. On the Day of Judgment, if you have worshipped Allah and you have prayed countless amounts of prayers and you have fasted for years and years, but you go to the court of Allah having not believed in one of the core fundamentals of the religion, everything will be rejected. As I recited in the prayer, الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ. That these are the people that prayed. Some of them prayed, but they prayed how? They showed off and prayed. And they prayed to please other people. They didn't pray to worship Allah. They didn't pray to please Allah. They prayed to show other people. So their aqidah, their belief system was corrupted. And what does Allah say to them? فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ. Yes? The wail is for those people. And wail is what? It's a valley in the pits of the hellfire. So these people will be thrown into Jahannam, into the fire of hell. Why? They did pray, they did fast, outwardly they believed, they were Muslims, but inwardly their hearts were corrupted and they did not have the correct and the true creed. Therefore they are worthy of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes? That's why Aqidah is important. But what is Aqidah then? The word Aqidah comes from the root word Ain, Qaf and Dal. Okay? Which means Aqd. In Arabic we use this terminology, and even in Urdu and in Punjabi I think, they use this word, Aqd. Aqd literally means to tie or to bind together. Aqd, Ain, Qaf and Da literally means to tie or to bind. Now what does this mean? We use it in the sense that when you say a person has bought something from another individual, they have entered into a financial transaction, and that in Arabic is called an Aqd. Okay? And why is it called an aqd? Because the buyer and the seller, these two parties have tied themselves together. In terms of the contract that they have made, they've tied themselves together and they are now, both of them are bound by that contract. That's why it's called an aqd. Another example for your understanding is what is aqd. We use this word called aqdun nikah. Aqdun nikah. What does that mean? The contract of marriage. Okay, when the imam comes and he does the ijab and the qabul and then you sign the document, what's that? Aqdun nikah, the contract of marriage. Why is that known as a contract? Because why is that known as an aqd? It's known as an aqd because the two parties, the bride and the groom, have entered into an agreement that they will live together, they will provide for each other, etc., etc. All of the contracts, all of the conditions that are mentioned within the nikah contract, all of those must be fulfilled. What's happened now? The two parties have tied themselves together and both of them are now bound by that contract. That's why it's known as an aqd. In a similar way, the word aqidah Okay, the word Aqidah, what does it mean in Islamic terminology? In Islamic terminology, Aqidah refers to a set of beliefs. A set of beliefs or a set of doctrines that every believer is bound by. And a believer must tie himself to these sets of beliefs to be able to be a believer. For him to be classified as a believer, or for him to have him or her to have true faith, they must bound themselves by these set of principles, these set of aqidah, these articles of faith, whatever you wish to call them. We have many different translations for them in the English language. Okay, that is aqidah. Moving on from that, now that you've understood what is aqidah, it's important to understand what are we going to cover in aqidah. What does it refer to? Is it all just about God and Allah, what we believe about Allah? No. There are three broad categories that the topic and the genre of aqidah is split into. The first category is known as ilahiyat. What is it known as? Ilahiyat. Category number one is known as ilahiyat. The category of ilahiyat, it covers all of those beliefs and all of those doctrines which are related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything related to God is covered under the chapter or under the category of ilahiyat, and it's made from the word ilah, which means God. Ilahiyat are those doctrines or those beliefs which are related to or which pertain to the existence of Allah, for example. Okay, we will talk about that, the existence of Allah. We talk about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Has Allah been created? These are potential questions that will be discussed and argued in the section of ilahiyat. All of these things are discussed in the section of ilahiyat. So anything which is related to God in terms of creed and belief will come under the chapter of ilahiyat. After that chapter, you have a chapter known as nubuwat. A chapter which is known as nubuwat, or a category known as nubuwat. And nubuwat, the word itself is derived from the word nabi, and we all know what that means. Nabi means prophets. So in this chapter, everything which is pertaining to prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messengers, all of them set of beliefs are discussed in the chapter of nubuwat. Okay, the first chapter ilahiyat, everything pertaining to God. The second chapter, nubuwat, everything pertaining to messengers and prophets. What does that include? It includes, for example, miracles. What must a believer believe regarding miracles? Do we have to believe in every single miracle, or do we have to only believe in the miracles that we witnessed? Now we have come 1400 years later. The miracles took place 1400 years before us. The miracles of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and before that the miracles of Sayyidina Isa, before that the miracles of Sayyidina Musa, etc., etc. All of these miracles have taken place before our existence, before we came into this world. Do we have to believe in the miracles or not? Okay, all of these set of beliefs are under the category of nubuwat. For example, is it permissible or is it possible for a prophet to lie? That will also come under the chapter of nubuwat. Is it possible for a prophet to be a woman? That will also come under the chapter of nubuwat. Are all prophets humans, or are some of them angels and jinns as well? All of these questions, all of these answers will come in the chapter of nubuwat, because nubuwat discusses what? It discusses every aspect of creed that is related to the prophets and the messengers alayhimus salatu wassalam. And the third chapter is the one people enjoy the most. The third chapter, its title is Sam'iyat. The third chapter is known as, or the third category is known as Sam'iyat. So we have Ilahiyat, Nubuwat, and Sam'iyat. The word Sam'iyat is derived from Sam'. Sami'a yasma'u. Sam'an fahuwa sami'un. Sam' means to listen, to hear. Yes? So Sam'iyat are those things which are heard. Sam'iyat are those things which are heard, literally. What does this chapter cover? What does this category deal with? This category deals with those set of beliefs that can only be established or that can only be comprehended once somebody has told us or informed us about them. Okay? So those set of beliefs that can only be established after the telling of somebody else, or after the informing of another. Who is this another going to be? Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's it. So anything that Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have told us that nobody else could tell us, that comes under the category of sam'iyyat. Let me give you an example. What kinds of discussions fall under sam'iyyat? The discussion regarding the punishment of the grave. Now, is it possible for any human to comprehend the punishment of the grave? No. Is it possible for any human to reach a logical conclusion by putting a sughra, an awsat and a kubra together and reaching a natija? Is it possible to form a logical reasoning or a logical argument and get to the conclusion of there being punishment in the grave? No. Why? Because these things are from the ghaib. They are from the ghaib. Ghaib meaning the unseen. If we cannot witness it, we can't believe it. If we cannot see it with our eyes or comprehend it with our mind or reach a logical conclusion using our logic, our mantiq, then it's impossible for us to reach that conclusion. So the details or the set of beliefs that fall under sam'iyyat are only those things that only Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam can inform us of. For example, the punishment of the grave. Now the punishment of the grave is established within the Quran and the Sunnah, and very firmly established. Every single believer, every single Muslim must believe in the punishment of the grave. Not for themselves, of course, but that there will be some people who will be punished in the grave. Because Allah has promised this, and the Messenger ﷺ has mentioned explicitly in multiple ahadith that this will occur. Now if a person rejects this, he is rejecting an essential part of the faith. Okay? Another topic or another discussion that comes within the discussion or the subject of sam'iyyat is the existence of jinn and angels. We cannot see jinns and we cannot see angels. So how can we possibly reach a logical conclusion regarding the existence of jinns and angels? We can't see them, we can't comprehend them. Our minds will not be able to reach a conclusion about the existence of jinns unless somebody has told us about them. And who is that somebody? Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another example will be the Day of Judgment. Now if you were born into this world and nobody ever told you about there being a Day of Judgment, you could not rationally come to the conclusion that there will be a Day of Judgment and people will be held accountable. Whereas you can rationally come to the conclusion about the existence of a creator, which we will discuss further. You can rationally come to that conclusion, but you can never come to a conclusion rationally that there will be a Day of Judgment where everybody will be accountable to God. Why? Because it's not rational. Rather, we have been told this, we have been informed about this from Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's the third category. In that third category, we discuss the signs of the Day of Judgment. The Day of Judgment itself, doomsday, etc., etc. All of these come into there. Why? Because we cannot make this up. We cannot reach these conclusions logically. Allah and His Messenger have said this will happen, therefore it will happen. And these have now become essential parts of our faith. So the three categories or the three areas of discussion that Aqidah covers is number one, ilahiyat. Number one, ilahiyat. Ilahiyat discusses what? All the beliefs pertaining to Allah. The second discussion is, or the second category or chapter is the category of nubuwwat. What does nubuwwat discuss? Any belief, any creedal point, any matter relating to the prophets or the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third category is known as sam'iyyat. Sam'iyyat deals with what? Anything that was informed to us by Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, such as angels, jinns, the Day of Judgment, etc., etc. So these are all the three categories that we will be discussing throughout our very short and concise lecture series. I just want to make you aware that if you were to go into detail in just these three categories, there are voluminous books written on each category alone. So you can find a 10-volume book just on ilahiyat. You can find a 10-volume book just on nubuwwat. And you can find a 10-volume book just on the sam'iyyat and them discussions alone. Of course, I will not do that, otherwise we will be here for a couple of decades and we still wouldn't get through the first book. Yes? So I'm going to summarize all of the content and all of the discussions from them books to make it easier for you to understand. We will not be going into theology. Okay, people tend to confuse the two, Aqidah and Kalaam. Okay, Aqidah is one thing, Kalaam is another thing. Aqidah deals with just the fundamental doctrines, what you have to believe, that's it. What Kalaam does, Kalaam goes into the why. Why do you believe this? Why can you not believe this? For example, it is a central part of our faith to believe in one God. Now, if somebody asks you, why do you believe in one God? That is a separate subject, okay? That's a separate field of study which is known as Kalaam theology, which we can go into inshallah in the future. But at the moment, we will just stick to the basic tenets of faith, what we believe. And why we believe it is a longer discussion, and that requires a study of mantiq, which is logic, and it requires study of other sciences to be able to go into the depths of Aqidah. Okay, so we'll cover the basics of these three categories, and then inshallah, as we get better and better at the basics, we can move on to the intermediate level, and inshallah thereafter go into some of the advanced discussions. The final point in terms of the introduction is, where is Aqidah taken from? Okay, what is the source of Aqidah? Did I just prepare a 1-hour Aqidah class and I came up with everything myself? Like, listen, the people in Greengate must believe this. No, it's not anything I've made up. It's not anything that any scholar has made up. Rather, the sources of our Aqidah, the sources of our beliefs are two, which are what? The Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran, which is the Kalaam, the speech and the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the second source being the hadith of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. These are the two sources of our beliefs. We do not take our beliefs from anything else. That's it. Our beliefs are based upon the Quran and the Sunnah, the fundamental and the core beliefs. Anything other than that is dhanni, meaning it will not take you outside of the folds of Islam. There are still certain things which are said to be part of the creed of a Sunni, or those who adhere to the Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Okay, these are separate to these which we will be covering. Because a person who denies something which the Ahlul Sunnah believe will not be taken out of the folds of Islam. Okay, he will be termed what? He will be termed a mubtadi', meaning an innovator, because he has innovated a creed which is new to the religion, and nobody has ever believed this. But the thing that he has formulated an opinion about is not from the fundamentals or from the tenets of faith. Okay, if anybody denies a fundamental aspect of the deen, which we will cover as we go along this, anybody who denies any of this becomes a disbeliever. Why? Because believing in these things is what makes you a Muslim, what makes you a believer. If you deny any of this, you become what? A kafir. A kafir, which means disbeliever. Okay, so that's the difference between some of the aspects of creed that we have compared to some of the more important aspects of creed. A lot of the time we find ourselves concentrating on those matters which are not necessarily part of the creed of a believer. Okay, for example, and I'm going to give this example to make it clear. For example, Mawlid. Believing in the permissibility of Mawlid is not an essential part of being a Muslim. If somebody does not celebrate Mawlid or denies the permissibility of Mawlid, they do not become a kafir, they do not become a disbeliever. Why? Because believing in the permissibility of Mawlid or other such things is not an essential part of the religion. Okay, depending on their level, they will be termed an innovator because they have innovated something within the creed, and depending on the belief that they hold regarding that thing. That's a very long discussion. Even then, I do not recommend any of you to go out and using these labels to anybody. I'm telling you these labels so you are able to distinguish between what is essential creed and what is the extra creed, which we call. Okay, so the essential creed is what we will be covering. Anybody who denies any of this will leave the folds of Islam. Why? Because these things have been proven from the Quran and the Sunnah. And anybody who denies even a single verse of the Quran becomes a disbeliever. Okay, that's where Aqidah is derived from. Aqidah is derived from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that was an introduction to why we are here, what we are doing, what we will cover, and what is the importance of the subject matter that we will be dealing with. Now, let me go into the very first chapter I'm using a book called 𝗕𝗘𝗟𝗘𝗙, but I'm going to commentate on that and not go through the book literally word for word. I'm going to commentate on some of the parts and we can go through it quicker. As we mentioned, the first category of Aqidah is what? Ilahiyat. The first category of Aqidah is Ilahiyat, and that is what we will begin with. We will begin with the Fundamental Doctrines, and I'm going to keep using this word because this was the title of our lecture series. The Fundamental Doctrines regarding or pertaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What must every single Muslim at the very minimum believe regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Okay, we start with this. Everything in this world is subject to change, and everything will cease to exist at some point in time. Everything was created after having not existed previously, and therefore there is certainly someone who creates and annihilates these things. This is the very first premise that the author uses to prove what? To prove the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Because before believing in anything regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you must believe in the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which is what? The wujud. Wujud means what? Existence. The very first thing. You can believe in the sifat of Allah, the attributes. But the attributes are in need of the existence of the that, okay, the essence of God to be able to exist. So the very first thing you must formulate a belief or a creedal point on is the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How does the author prove this? The author uses logic and reasoning. And he says that everything in the world changes. And everything that is subject to change must have been created. Okay? And everything that is created will perish. Okay? And all of this process requires what? It requires a creator. Somebody who is going to create the thing. Okay? How does he reach this conclusion? Everything is created because everything changes. When we see change in the world, the word change in Arabic is known as taghayyur. And when you study mantiqa, where you go into theology, you will be exposed to this principle, okay? This rational argument, which is what? Al-alamu mutaghayyirun wa kullu mutaghayyirin hadithun fal-alamu hadithun. Al-alamu mutaghayyirun means what? That the world and the universe is changing. Wa kullu mutaghayyirin hadithun, and everything that changes shall perish. فَالْعَالَمُ حَادِثٌ, therefore the universe will perish. Okay? This is a logical reasoning, a logical argument that is formulated. How can we establish the first premise within this, which is al-alamu mutaghayyirun? The universe is subject to change. We see this with our own two eyes. We see that everything in the world is constantly changing. Such as it was snowing earlier today and now it's not snowing. Some days it rains, some days it doesn't rain. The weather constantly changes. That indicates to us that there is change. Similarly, for a couple of hours, the sun is out and it shines. It shows us light, and that's what we call daytime. Then the sun sets and the moon becomes visible. That's what we call night. The rising of the sun and the setting of the sun, the appearance of the moon and the disappearance of the moon, all of this indicates change. So we have reached this logical conclusion by observing the universe, that the universe is subject to change. Okay? And everything that is subject to change will perish. Okay? Everything that is subject to change. For example, when the sun rises, it's like a new birth for the sun. And then what happens when it sets? It perishes. It rises again, then it perishes. It rises, then it perishes. And that occurs for everything within the universe. Look at ourselves, our lives. Have we always existed? No. We were born as children. We grow up into our teenage years. Then we go into adulthood or manhood. Then we go into our old age, and then we pass away. We leave the world. So we have a beginning and then we have an end. We were created and then we perish. This is change. We change every single day. You become from a small little child into a fully grown man. That indicates change. I'm just giving some very evident examples. But you are able to observe and witness change throughout the world in every single thing. So when the universe constantly changes, it indicates that it will perish. Now something which will perish must have been created. It's a logical argument. Something which will cease to exist must have been created, because something that has existed forever can never perish. Something that has existed forever can never perish. So because we have reached the conclusion that the world and the universe will perish, it must have been created. And it cannot create itself. Nothing can create itself. You cannot make 0 plus 0 equals 0 plus 0 equals 0. 0 plus 0 cannot equal 1. Wherever you find a 0, it's going to equal nothing. Why? Because nothing can create itself. You can't be created yourself. Okay? That's again illogical, irrational. I have this mobile phone in front of me. Has this mobile phone created itself? No, it's been through a journey. It's been through factories in China and probably other places, and then shipped into the UK in the hands of people who own mobile shops. Then it reached me. It didn't just come out of nothing. It's impossible, it's irrational to believe that something created itself. Okay? So if little things like an Apple iPhone or a camera or a piece of paper doesn't fall from the tree, you have to cut the tree down, you have to go through the process of making the paper, then now it's ended up in my hand. Okay? These are little minute things. All of these require a process. They require somebody to do the hard work. They require somebody to do the logical thinking. They require someone to put the effort in. So all of these little things require our hard work, our effort, our mind, our skills to come into existence. Then how is it rationally possible or logically possible for an entire universe, for an entire system of creation to exist, for us to live and die, for the sun to rise and to set? How can all of this nizam of the world exist without somebody running it? Okay? That is the logical reasoning that is used to prove what? That there must be a creator. There must be a creator. Khaliq, which we call in Arabic. What do we call? Khaliq. It is one of the divine names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is the Khaliq, He is the creator. So now that we've established the existence of God, and we've established that He has created everything, we move ahead. That there is an absolute creator, an annihilator of everything, and His name is Allah. Okay? So now if any atheist comes to you and questions you about the existence of God, you cannot use Quran and Hadith to an atheist. You can't say, because it says in the Quran, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, that, oh messenger, say, verily Allah is one. Okay? You can't quote the Quran to them. They don't believe in the Quran. What are you going to use instead? Your logical reasoning. And you're going to say to them that the littlest things and the smallest things in life require a creator, require somebody's skill set, require somebody's hard work. Then how can the entire universe function on itself? Okay, from itself. How can the universe do the thinking itself and run itself? It requires a creator, and that creator is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he carries on and he says, He has existed always and will exist forever. That creator, Allah, has existed since the beginning. And that beginning is in speech marks as well, because there is no beginning to God. He has existed forever and He will exist forever. Meaning there is no perish to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, I'll cover a lot of the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they all allude to one of the attributes or the characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the names is al-Baqi. Al-Baqi means what? Al-Baqi means the everlasting. Okay? The one that has no end. And that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no end. He has no beginning. Azaliyun abadiyun. He has no beginning and He has no end. Okay? That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You must believe that. If anybody believes otherwise, they are then a disbeliever. They have left the folds of Islam. He has created everything in the universe, the heavens, the earth, the moon, the stars, humans, animals, and everything that exists. Okay, this is again Al-Khaliq, one of the divine names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Khaliq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything, the absolute creator. Okay, the absolute creator. It's important to define it as such. the absolute creator. Why? Because if I was to ask you who created this mobile phone, okay, you're going to have multiple answers. Some of you might say the late Steve Jobs. Some of you might say a person sitting in a factory in China created this phone. Okay, so you are attributing what? You are attributing creation to human beings, whereas human beings do not create. It is Allah who creates. But Allah creates the means within the human beings to create. And that's why we say Allah is al-Khaliq, the absolute creator. Okay? Because if you create something, the question arises, who created you? Or who granted you the ability to create? That was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, He is al-Khaliq, the absolute creator. Nobody can create anything without the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you the ability to create, you cannot create, because He is the absolute creator. He moves on and He says, He gives sustenance to everything. Everyone and everything depend upon Him. Another one of the divine names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Al-Razzaq. Al-Razzaq. Al-Razzaq means what? The sustainer. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who provides us with rizq, with sustenance. And this is essential to believe. And when you have these basic beliefs, it will help you in your day-to-day life. When you go to work, you do not go to work thinking or with the mentality that the person or your employer is your Razzaq. Your employer is not the one that gives you rizq. The one that gives you rizq ultimately is who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why these basic creedal points, if you formulate them and you use them on a daily basis, they will bring about change in your life. Okay? So Allah is al-Razzaq. He is the sustainer, the one who grants everything. Okay? Moving on, He says, He is the one who gives sustenance. It is only He who gives life and death. Two other names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are what? Al-Muhyi. One of the 99 names of Allah, Al-Muhyi. Al-Muhyi means the one who grants life, the one who gives life. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody else has the ability to give life other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another name of Allah is Al-Mumit. Al-Mumit means what? He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives death. Allah is the one who grants life, and Allah is the one who gives death. He is the absolute owner and Lord of everyone. No one can defy His command. Another name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Malik. Al-Malik. Al-Malik refers to what? The ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That in reality, nobody in the entire universe owns anything. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And this again is a very important aspect of creed. And you're probably thinking, we already know this, but you don't use this on a daily basis. If you are arguing about property cases in Pakistan and you're spending your entire life arguing about them, and you say, this is my zameen, or this is my land, this is mine, this is mine. If you understand that you own nothing, it is Allah who is Al-Malik. He is the ultimate owner of everything. Nothing belongs to anybody. He owns everything. When it comes to our body, okay, when we discuss organ donations, one of the opinions on organ donation is that it's impermissible. Other scholars have permitted it. That's a different argument, a different discussion in and of itself. But why do they say it's impermissible to donate your organs? Because you do not own them. Who owns your organs? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because He is the ultimate owner of everything. So again, all of this relates back to our creed that Allah is Al-Malik, He owns everything. He continues, He is perfect in every way and He is free from every defect, flaw or fault. No defect, no flaw and no fault can be attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are a certain group of people which attribute lying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now lying is what? Lying is not treated as a good thing. If your son or your daughter comes and lies to you, you will not give them money, you will not congratulate them, you will not be proud of them. You will tell them off. Why will you tell them off? Because lying is not a good thing. It is inherently bad. So somebody who attributes lying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has breached this basic tenet of faith. They have attributed a flaw to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And all other flaws and all other defects that we perceive of, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from every single one of them. Continuing, He says, He knows everything. This is again one of the 99 names of Allah. He is Al-Alim. He is Al-Alim, meaning the one who knows, or the all-knowing. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows everything, whether it is hidden from us or apparent to us, whether we hide it within our hearts or we reveal it and make it apparent through our tongues. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of every single thing and He knows everything. Nothing is concealed from His absolute knowledge. Just as Allah has existed from eternity, so also do His attributes exist from eternity without a beginning. Meaning, the existence of Allah, we've established that, the Wujud. Then we established that He has existed from the beginning or since forever, and He will exist forever. In the same way that He Himself, His essence, His that will exist, in the same manner His sifat, His attributes, His characteristics. What are some of the characteristics and attributes of Allah? Such as Him being all-knowing, such as Him being all-seeing, such as Him being all-hearing, such as Him being Rahman, Rahim, such as Him being the Mutakallim, the one who speaks. All of these are attributes and sifat of Allah. They also exist since forever and they will also last forever. Okay, so the creed is that the that, the essence of Allah, and the sifat, the attributes of Allah have been from the beginning, again beginning in speech marks, since the beginning of time, and they will last forever. Even though time is a creation of Allah, we have to use these words to be able to explain what we are conveying. He continues and he says, everything in this world that exists is created. Created, the Arabic term for created is makhluq. Every single thing is makhluq. Makhluq means created. Khaliq means creator, the one who creates. And whatever He creates is known as makhluq, the creation. All of us are His slaves. Now we come into the picture. Then what are we in this world? We are the slaves and the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is far more benevolent towards us than our own parents. Now he talks about some of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Him being Rahman and Rahim. When we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, the most gracious, and there's multiple different translations. What are we actually saying? Rahman and Rahim are attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which indicate or which relate to His mercy and His love that He has for us, who are what? We are slaves of Allah. How much love does He have for us? When the author says that He has more love for us than our parents have for us. Where is he taking this from? He is taking this from a hadith of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, where a mother was running searching for her child. When she found her child, and obviously if you lose your child, you become worried, you become distressed. She was running around amongst hundreds of people trying to locate her child. When she found her child, she picked the child up and she hugged her very tightly. She hugged him or her very tightly. And the Prophet ﷺ witnessed this. And he said to his companions, "O my companions, do you think this mother will ever willingly throw her own child into the fire of hell?" The companions replied, "Ya Rasulullah, if she had the ability to do, she would never do that. She loves her child so much, why would she ever throw her willingly into the fire of hell?" The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam replied, "O my companions, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you more than this mother loves her child." This indicates the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Rahman and Rahim. It indicates His mercy, that if we follow the commands and we believe, as we should believe, we follow the true creed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. He will have mercy upon us. Carrying on, what happens then when we sin? What does this Lord, this Creator do? What benefit does He bring us? He is the one who forgives sins. Okay, He is Al-Ghafur. Again, one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Ghafur, the forgiver. If we commit sins, we wrong ourselves. Allah is Al-Ghafur, He is the one who forgives those sins. And what happens when we make dua to Allah? We ask Allah to forgive us. What does He do? He is At-Tawwab. Again, one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At-Tawwab meaning what? He is the one who accepts our repentance. He's the one who accepts our tawbah. His authority is absolute. His hold is supreme and powerful. None can escape His grasp or can be released from it except by His own will. Allah says in the Quran, "Inna batsha rabbika la shadid." Verily the grasp of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very severe. Meaning when Allah will hold you to account for what you have done, nobody can release you from His accountability until He lets go Himself, until He forgives you, until He gives you what is due upon you. So nobody can change what Allah has destined or Allah has willed to happen. Nobody can defy a command of Allah, and we cannot even question anything that Allah does. Okay? Because we are not creators, we are makhluk, we are creation. Moving on, there's only a few things left. I aim to finish in about 5 minutes, inshaAllah. He moves on and he says, and these again are very essential points of creed, that if you understand these in your day-to-day life, you will benefit from them. Honor and disgrace are in His power. He says within the Quran, وَتُعِزُّ مَن تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَن تَشَاءُ, that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who grants honor to people, to whoever He wishes. وَتُذِلُّ مَن تَشَاءُ, and He disgraces whomever He wishes. Both honor and disgrace are within the dominion and the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if Allah has granted us honor, we should be grateful. If Allah has disgraced us, we should repent back to Allah so He grants us honor. Okay? Both of these things are in the hand of in the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody from the creation can grant us honor if Allah does not want to grant us honor. And nobody in the creation can disgrace you if Allah wants to grant you honor. Okay, remember, this is an aspect of creed that you can make this into a mentality, a way of thinking, that nobody has the authority to grant you honor or to disgrace you unless Allah has willed for that to happen. Moving on, he says He gives honor and disgrace to whomever He pleases. He can make whomever He wishes wealthy and poor. Again, this is one of the most debated topics within the world. Poverty, world poverty. Why are some people rich? Why are some people poor? Because Allah willed it that way. That's the simple answer. Allah willed for some people to be poor and Allah willed for some people to be rich. But does that mean the rich are inherently rich and the poor are inherently poor? No. He says within the Quran, تُؤْتِ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّن تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّن تَشَاءُ, that if He has given kingdom to someone, if He has given riches to someone, He can take that away from you as well. And if he has made you poor, He can grant you that kingdom as well. So poverty and richness are in the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody else controls the poverty of an individual or the richness of an individual other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He continues and he says, whatever He does is full of divine wisdom and is absolutely just. Again, two more names, divine names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Hakim or Al-Hakam. The word Hakim comes within the Quran. The word Hakam comes within the 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Hakamul Adal. Al-Hakam means what? He is the wise. Okay? Absolute wisdom is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He is just. In every single thing that He does, He is just. And the word for that is Al-Adl. Okay? Al-Hakamul Adal. Okay? Adl literally means justice. Al-Adal means the one who is just. Al-Hakamul Adal, He is the one who is wise and He is the one who is just. He will grant paradise to Muslims and punish disbelievers by sending them to hell. Whoever believes, whoever accepts all of these fundamental doctrines and does good deeds, He will grant you, He will reward you for the actions that you have done. Reward you by what? Reward you by paradise, which we will discuss inshaAllah in the coming lectures. What is paradise? And He will punish those who disbelieve, who do not accept these fundamental doctrines and these tenets of faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them in the fire of hell. All His actions are full of wisdom, irrespective of whether His creation can comprehend it or not. Sometimes we see things happening in the world, we are not able to comprehend them, and we begin to question, why is God doing this? Why is Allah doing this? Why can this not be that way? Why has this happened? Why has that happened? Okay? The argument of evil and suffering. Okay, this is one of the biggest arguments used by atheists to prove that there is no God. And we use this same argument to prove that there is God. Okay, which we will discuss inshallah further when we go into the detailed lectures about evil and suffering. Okay, these things are there for a reason. And why are they there for a reason? What is the reason? You may not be able to comprehend it. Because how can you try to comprehend everything which Allah has done? How can you do that? You have an infinite mind. Okay? Sorry, you have a finite mind. Your knowledge is limited. Your comprehension is limited. Okay? You cannot possibly comprehend everything. You cannot possibly understand everything. Okay, some basic concepts of science or mathematics, people struggle to understand them. Why? Because their mind is finite. They can't understand and comprehend everything. In a similar manner, if you think, why is God doing this? First, you should think that our mind is finite. We cannot comprehend everything. And believe that there is wisdom and there is reason why Allah has done this. Why? Because He is al-Hakam al-Adal. He is the one who is just and He's the one who is wise. His favors and bounties upon us all are countless and infinite. Okay? The bounties and favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I constantly mention this in Jum'ah. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you were to limit or number or count the bounties, the favors Allah has given to you, لَا تُحْصُوهَا, you will never be able to count them. From the very basics of being able to breathe in and breathe out. Every single time you do that, that is the Khaliq, that is Allah giving you the ability to do that. Every single time. Okay? Not breathing in and out is not one favor. Breathing in is one favor and breathing out is another favor. How many times a day do we do this? Countless times. And why is each one a favor? If you breathe in and you don't breathe out, you're dead. If you breathe out and you don't breathe in, you're dead, you pass away. So every single breath in is a favor, every single breath out is a favor from Allah. Okay? And what is He getting to by mentioning this? That if He subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted you all of these favors and His attributes are such, He alone is worthy of worship and none other than Him can be worshipped. That's the conclusion He is reaching by mentioning all of this. That He has all of these attributes. He is the most benevolent. He is all-knowing, all-seeing. He has granted you everything that you possess in this world. This means what? He is the one that must be worshipped. Okay, He is worshipped means He is the ma'bud, the Arabic word. The ma'bud meaning the one who is worshipped, the ma'bud. We are known in Arabic as the abid, the worshipper. And He is the ma'bud, the one being worshipped. And we say this, La ilaha illallah. This is our very basic kalima. La ilaha illallah. There is nobody worthy of worship except Allah. Okay, La ilaha illallah. Why has He reached this conclusion, or why should we do that? Because of everything that I've just mentioned for the past 40 minutes. All of these things are from God. Nobody else has given us anything. Therefore, it is God that we should worship. Then He mentions some of the attributes of Allah, which we will cover in detail, inshallah, in the coming lectures. That He subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever living, al-Hayy. He subhanahu wa ta'ala is all powerful, al-Qadir. He subhanahu wa ta'ala is all hearing, as-Sami'. He subhanahu wa ta'ala is all seeing, al-Basir. He is the one who speaks, al-Mutakallim. He is all knowing, al-Alim. And He is the one with absolute independent will, al-Murid. He is not the father nor the son of anyone. He does not have a wife or a relative. He is free from such attributes, which is a basic summary of which surah of the Quran? Surah al-Ikhlas. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ Allahu Samad, Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad. He does not create, He does not produce offspring, and He has not been created Himself. Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad wa Lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. And there is nothing like Him. Okay? The Surah al-Ikhlas is the crux of our Aqidah with regards to ilahiyat and with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. O Messenger, say to these people, Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. Allah, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Allah is one. Allahu Samad. He is what? He is independent. He is not in need of anything. Rather, we as creation are in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every single thing. He does not have any offspring and He was not created, and there is nothing like Him. And there is no partner for Him. That is what we call shirk. Attributing or associating partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala falls under shirk, which is a form of disbelief, which is the worst form of kufr. Okay? We do not attribute anything which is attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way it is attributed to Allah to anybody from creation. Okay? For example, Allah being Hayy. Allah being Hayy. Allah is ever living. You are also Hayy. And Allah mentions this in the Quran. Allah is Sami'. Allah is Basir. He mentions that in the Quran. But then in the same Quran He says, وَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. And we made it, meaning the human, we made it what? سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. a individual which sees and which hears. So Allah has granted us these two abilities. So what's the difference here? The difference is that the attribute of hearing and seeing of Allah is completely different to ours. And ours is granted, His is inherent, meaning He possesses it without anybody giving it to Him, and we possess it because Allah has granted it to us. This is a basic difference between the attributes of creation and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can go in more detail inshallah in the coming weeks. But next week, this was the entire discussion of ilahiyat on a very basic level. And you're probably thinking, Shah Sahib, this is ilahiyat, this is the belief regarding God. Why was it so brief? Why was it so short? And we're moving on next week. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that our minds are not capable of taking in so much information. If we were commanded to believe 500 things about Allah, we'll probably get lost. It will be very difficult for a believer to become a believer, because it will take years of study to be able to understand and comprehend and then believe in them 500 things. That's why the tenets of faith, what Allah requires us to believe about Him, are very few. So everybody can easily remember this. Now that I have conveyed this to you, I request you to convey this message on to others. These are the very basics and the very fundamental doctrines that every single individual must believe regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Next week, what we will discuss, we will discuss the beliefs and the doctrines regarding the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Within there, we will discuss why are prophets sent, who are prophets, what is the need of prophets, why were prophets given books such as the Quran, what is possible for prophets, what is impossible for prophets, why do prophets perform miracles, what are some of the miracles, how do we logically understand miracles. All of these things inshallah will be discussed next week.